speak with you tonight. I just got in from, actually all the way from Pennsylvania. I did stay in Tennessee last night. I went up there to see my son Daniel. He's our second son. He goes to Grove City College, and it was a great week. We got a letter stating that he was a senior, though he's just in his third year. And it's amazing what happens when you give an allotment of money and how much you can spend. And it depends upon your son or your daughter. They make good use of it. But the most important thing is he got engaged and his best friend this last week. He goes to Grove City College, and what's interesting about that to y'all is that they don't take any state or federal money. And there's only a couple schools that are like that, Hillsdale College and I believe Patrick Henry College in Virginia. But what's unique about Grove City is that Grove City had to fight a lawsuit, I believe in the late 80s, it may have been the 90s, not to take federal money. Isn't that incredible? And they won it. And he's enjoying his studies there. I'm going to give you a little report on the 83rd legislature tonight, but before I forget it, I have a lot of this in a report that you may want to take and pass on to your friends, or just to remind you what I talked about tonight. It's out by my cowboy hat on the table out there. But thank you so much. And before I forget this, I do just want to tell you how much an honor it is to serve you. I stand on your shoulders. I covet your prayers. I don't want to become just another politician. I want to be a Christian statesman. And the longer you're in office, the more difficult that becomes. And your principles, if they're not set before you get there, they're probably just going to get worse. So I do plead with you that you would pray for me. And I do, in a real way, believe I stand on your shoulders, and I want to get out of office before I lose my principles. And not just in my head, but in my heart and with that machine I vote with. Well, we finished up the 83rd regular session required by the Constitution on Memorial Day, May 27th, I believe. But then the governor called us back to 3 back-to-back special sessions. But I am glad to be here now, and it's sort of good news. I usually try to remind people of Mark Twain's comments that your life, liberty, and property are never safe while the legislature's in session, and that's true. And it's only sort of safe now, because we do have an unusual process going on. It's only gone on twice before in the history of our state. But we formed the House Select Committee on Transparency on State Operations. And guess who they're investigating? They're investigating someone who is trying to make things more transparent, trying to uncover some things that he was charged with as a regent of the University of Texas system. And so the proclamation that the House Speaker gave, though, was not just limited to him, although I believe that is the main intent, is just to deal with him. But it's pretty open-ended. They could basically proceed to investigate anybody in the state. And I'm a little concerned about it. I've been asking some questions, and you may read a little more about that in the days and weeks to come. Can y'all hear me okay?
No.
Well, anyway, so your life, liberty, and property are pretty much safe now that we've adjourned. But I want to tell you about what we did, what we didn't do, both the good, the bad. And y'all stop me at any point along the way. I will try to reserve some time at the end for questions. But if you want to stop me right where I am and follow something up, feel free to do that. Each legislature really is unique. It's kind of like children. Most of y'all know I have 7 of them. They're all different. They all have peculiar personalities and strengths and weakness. And that's kind of the way each legislature is. There are some commonalities, but there are also many differences. I'll start with the most encouraging thing, and that is that we had some conservative freshmen that didn't go down there to just sit and shut up, as many times is expected by the leadership. But they weren't brash. They waited, and many times to learn, and they were respectful, but they got to work. They formed coalitions, and they sought to represent their constituencies. And they were particularly excited about liberty and limited government. Jonathan Stickland from Bedford, Euless, Hurst area, I think he gave me a run for my money on voting no against more bills than any other House rep. But you know, one of the things that's really important is that the way you stop government growth is you just say no. And we can just keep the budget where it is, and the debasement of the currency will cause the government to decrease. Jonathan Stickland did a great job along with some other freshmen, and not only in learning how most of your legislation is passed on the local and consent calendar, but having the courage to stand up and actually oppose it. And then there was another freshman named Matt Schaefer, a little closer to home here from Tyler, that really stood up against the unnecessary expansion of licensing and regulation. And he nearly stopped 1 bill or 2 bills all by himself. And I sure hope the citizens of Tyler will send him back to the Texas legislature. So I was not only joined by some liberty-loving conservatives, but also moderates, seniors and juniors in the Republican Party. They were really looking at some of the conservatives, the ones that really voted the way they campaigned. In fact, they were waiting until the last second to take many votes because they knew that they were getting ready to run for statewide office. And so they wanted to actually do what other conservatives were doing, and that was good to see. I worked with several different coalitions, limiting government growth, but also that was mainly Republicans. Although actually on some issues like corporate welfare, the Democrats are actually taking up those arguments, and that's good to see. Was able to build a broader coalition with respect to protecting civil liberties. That wasn't just limited to the Republican Party, but was able to work with Democrats as well on protecting the due process, privacy. It's not just the NSA that's spying on you, but oftentimes your local law enforcement. And Jonathan Stickland passed an amendment to a bill that helped to restrict the use of location data from cell phones by your local law enforcement without a search warrant, and keeping that data for more than 6 months, which I was glad to support. The biggest coalition that I was glad to work with was, of course, the pro-life coalition. The first duty of government is to protect life.
Amen.
Without life, you can't have liberty.
That's right.
And you can't have property. You can't pursue happiness. And speaking of that, though all the pro-life bills were stopped in committee during the regular session. But thankfully, during the special session, the second special session, we did pass a strong pro-life bill that limits abortion after 20 weeks or 5 months. Now, we need to do a whole lot more than just that. But we were grateful that at least that science shows clearly that babies in the womb, human beings, but just haven't lived independently yet, feel pain. And most of us knew that, and mothers know that. When they are turning in the bed or their husband pokes up against that baby, the baby feels and moves and turns. So I'm grateful that we passed that legislation despite the filibuster and the first session, the first called special session. It wasn't just Wendy Davis, though, who slowed that bill down. That bill was slowed down in the House of Representatives as well. We went home on a Friday when we should have stayed and passed that bill on Saturday and sent it to the Senate a day and a half earlier than we did. And it wouldn't have been within the filibuster period. And you can only stand and speak so long. Even Ted Cruz didn't quite make 24 hours. So anyway, I was glad not to be quite as alone in my second session and worked with a number of coalitions. We have my hallway, of which Brian Hughes serves, and Jonathan Stickland, and several other freshman conservatives. We dubbed it Liberty Lane. And we worked together, we prayed together, and it was encouraging. And I'm not sure exactly why my second session was a little easier. Perhaps it's because I knew the ropes a little bit more, or because I wasn't quite so much the target to go along and get along. They left me alone. They knew pretty much where I stood. And so that pressure was not quite so great. That might have been because they had more targets this go around, which I was glad to share. Policy-wise, I think this was the session, at least the regular session, really to do nothing. And in some ways, that's really a good thing, because government doesn't do things very well. And it really is only made to punish the wrongdoer. And God gave civil government a sword, according to Romans 13. The sword is not very good for education. It's not very good for nurture. It's not very good for healing. But it's good for punishing. It's good for prodding and enforcing contracts, defending ourselves from our enemies. It's not very good for doing much else.